Hi, and welcome to the show. Well, today we're going to talk about pretty much the biggest topic there is, salvation. But I'm talking about earthly salvation. What's he talking about? I'm talking about climate change. I'm talking about reversing climate change. Stay tuned for the next 29 minutes, and you will have the answer. So, to get that, I had to bring in an expert, and I have with me Patriciafaye Marshal. Thanks so much for being here.
It's really fun to be with you.
We're going to talk about DRAWDOWN, and you are with you're a Pachamama Alliance facilitator.
That's true.
All right, in this program, DRAWDOWN, you're going around town and facilitating this information, these discussions.
It's the best news I've heard in years, well, ever, because the crisis that we're all facing is the biggest crisis that all humanity is facing. And this idea of drawdown, we'll go into what the definition of it is, but it is the solution that if we do these things, we can actually reverse global warming by 2050.
So that's the goal of this thing called drawdown. And we had the definition up here just a minute ago. Maybe you can bring that back. Here we go.
Okay, great. So you can see by this that that drawdown is that point in time when the concentration of greenhouse gases peak and begin to decline on a year-to-year basis.
And that's a result of our action.
It's a result of our action. These 100 solutions that Paul Hawken has come up with, he did this out of curiosity, really not out of fear. In 2001, he started asking, if there had been an inventory done, if there was a list anywhere of what it was that we exactly needed to do to reverse global warming. Mm-hmm. Then there wasn't one. And so he put out the call, and over 200 university students came together, people who had PhDs, people who were experts in all the fields of science, and they came up with 100 solutions, 80 of which are doable right now. 20 of them he calls coming attractions.
And that he published that in a book called Drawdown. You brought a copy of it with you.
Published it in a book called Drawdown. It was published in 2017, and it actually was the New York Times best-selling environmental book of that year.
And we've got a slide of that. Maybe we can put it on the screen here. If people want to go to Amazon.com, maybe they can order a copy.
Or a local bookstore.
Oh, of course.
Yes, here's the book, and you'll always see Drawdown written in capital letters. So you're going to start hearing about this around town, hopefully very soon. It's the best news.
So that's a little bit about how it came to be. Paul Hawken got together this research group, came up with these solutions. And how did you land upon this?
Well, my story is that, so I was born and raised in rural Mississippi, born in 1945. You can do the math. I know I don't look that old. But in 1981, I got involved with a group of people in San Francisco who actually turned out to be the founders of the Pachamama Alliance. We had that slide up at one time. Not yet. So the word Pachamama means Mother Earth and Father Time, so really all that is. It's a Quechua Indian name. So in 1981, I started working with Lynn Twist, who I've been involved with since then. Lynn went on to be, she worked at the Hunger Project at the time, and she went on to be one of the 3 founders of the Pachamama Alliance. They went to Ecuador in the early 90s, and they started working with the Achuar Indians there. So a lot of this wisdom that comes from the Pachamama Alliance is very old indigenous wisdom. And so in 2010, I went to Seattle to be trained as a facilitator for their programs. Mm-hmm. And it was there that, I thought I had been a good person up until then. I recycled and I, changed my light bulbs, and I did all those initial little things that we all try to do to make a difference. But if we tell the truth about it, we got to know that that is not going to be nearly enough. And so in this 3-day training, we watched video clip after video clip, of the Arctic ice caps melting and the polar bears jumping from one piece of ice to the other and getting really present to the extinction of the species. And I cried my eyes out for 3 nights. I came back to McMinnville and sat on my couch and said, what am I going to do? What can I do? I mean, I have 3 grandchildren, teenagers, and I want, and I know you do too. You want the world to be at least as beautiful and pristine and enjoyable as it was when we were kids. And so I went online. It didn't take very much research to find out that if you could keep food waste out of the landfill, that would be a really big help towards lowering the greenhouse gases, the methane that comes from the food when the food rots in the landfill without oxygen. So I said, well, we got a landfill right down the road. And I sort of went to work at that time to change things with regards to what goes to the landfill. Now that organization here in McMinnville you may have heard of is called Zero Waste. And we are trying to keep as much out of the landfill as we can. Now, when Drawdown came about, I was so lit up. I was so inspired by this information because it truly is the first good news about global warming. So here I am.
And this passion you have comes from maybe some very early roots. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I told you I grew up in rural Mississippi, and I was the last kid in the family. My parents were old. They never went anywhere. They never did anything. We lived way out in the country. I had no playmates. So I would go out the back gate and into the pasture and lay down in some really tall grasses to hide from my mother. And I would be out there in those tall grasses just listening to the crickets and frogs and smelling the smells and hearing the sounds of the farm. And that was a time in my life when I was probably no more than 5 or 6 years old. I started to listen to a voice in my head. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? That little voice in your head.
Sometimes when you're quiet, you do hear things.
You do hear things. And the voice was always a very positive voice for me. It was, it said things like, you're going to live to be a really old woman, and you're going to see a time when there's heaven on earth. Now, I was a Southern Baptist at the time, so that kind of made sense to me. I have lived with that vision of heaven on earth my whole life, and organizations I've worked for, things that I've done, the way I've navigated through the system, I've always held that. And when this came about, and Paul Hawkins started talking about the fact that global warming is happening for us, like it's an opportunity. You know, I know that is probably new information, but what if it were happening for us and not to us? You know, to me, that sounded like, oh my goodness, they're talking about this being the opportunity to create heaven on earth. So that is what pulled me into this work.
So when it's happening for us, because it is what from the earth?
Because it's feedback. The mess that we've gotten ourselves in over the last 200 years are because of the choices that humans have made. The use of fossil fuels, you know, consumerism, more is better, you know, just depleting the earth of all of its resources, not realizing that we live on a finite planet and it's the only one that supports life. You know, so the fact that we're interconnected to everything, you know, our actual breath right in this moment as we're breathing out carbon dioxide, the trees are breathing out oxygen. And we're in a very, very, very connected relationship. And we're just coming to realize that. We're coming to realize that we're not separate from nature. We're not separate from each other. We're not separate from anything. We're all part of the same thing.
So the fact that it's happening for us, yes, it's feedback because of the problems we're already seeing with climate change. But it's reminding us that perhaps we are separated from higher spiritual qualities, like you talked about consumerism and exploitation in many different ways. So it's feedback to make us look at perhaps those things as well.
Well, and to make us realize that even though the appearance seems like we're separate, the truth is we're not separate. So we've been fed this myth of separateness for forever, you know. Well, look at you, you know, it's clear you're over there and I'm over here. We're separate. But that's a trick. That's some kind of myth. That's a lie. I'm just going to come out and say we are not separate. We are connected and we're interdependent on each other and on the trees and on the rivers.
Now, as you've come into this practice, this facilitation, you've learned to become careful about your language. And I know when we were setting up our banners, we had the title was climate change. And you said, oh, no, wait a minute. I want the title of this program to be what?
Well, there really is a difference between climate change and global warming. And when you know the difference between that, you know when to use those terms interchangeably. Global warming has to do with the temperature of the Earth's surface. And human beings created the Earth warming up through our choices, through our actions. Climate change, on the other hand, is something that's always happening. It's cyclic, it's natural.
Okay.
So climate change affects all the systems, all the living systems, how we are all impacted by the changing climate. Global warming refers only to the warming of the Earth's surface. And since human beings created it, we can turn it around. That's the whole idea.
Turn it around. So not
Reverse it.
Not slow it down.
No, not slow it down, not mitigate it, not even stop it. It's like we need to stop the direction we're going in, turn around, and come back the other way.
Well, okay, I think we've been talking around these solutions.
Yes.
Maybe it's time to go to them.
Okay.
Well, let's pull up on the TV screen that list. Yeah, that one there. Can we put that in front of the viewers? There we go. So what have we got here, Patriciafaye?
So, like I said, they came up with 100 solutions. 80 of them are available right now. This order that you're seeing on your screen is the ranking of those. Now, surprisingly enough, I mean, the researchers were all surprised that the first one of those is refrigeration. So that's the off-gassing of the hydrofluorocarbons that come from air conditioners and so on. That is huge. I understand that I'm just learning about all of this myself, and today I read that under refrigeration that our country has an agreement, you know, one of those agreements like the Kyoto Protocol, but it's not that one, it's another one. The name of it slips my mind, but it says in that agreement that all the wealthy countries, and of course the United States is one of those, is committed to stopping this particular use of these hydrofluorocarbons this year in 2019.
Wow.
And it says by the time that all the countries of the world reverse that it's a huge impact. In each one of these solutions, they have done the scientific, you're not going to be able to see that, but you can see.
Let's go back to that slide on the screen. There we go.
You can see over to the far right, it's measured in gigatons. So what is the heading on that one? I can't quite see it.
Reduces
Reduces CO2 by that many gigatons. Now, just so you know, this 1 gigaton is 1 billion tons. So we hardly have any kind of idea of how to think about that, but that would be how much carbon dioxide would be reduced out of the atmosphere. This is carbon dioxide that's already in the atmosphere. That's another big distinction, is that most of the work we're doing now, like your cap and trade program that's in the legislature, you know, that is working to get rid of carbon dioxide emissions that are being emitted from now on. This drawdown idea is about sequestering. Sequestering means to bring the carbon down out of the atmosphere, bring it home, bring it back to the earth. So that is the other part that most of these solutions have to do with, is sequestering the carbon that's already in the atmosphere and bringing it back home.
All right, so this list is fascinating. Reduce food waste. Turbines, we missed, okay, wind turbines. Onshore, that's right up there with refrigeration.
Yes,
84
that's
gigatons.
huge.
Reduce food waste, that's what you're talking about. Right
And that
here at
kind of
home.
goes along with the plant-rich diet. When you come to educating girls, that is a very important one because although it's rated number 6 there,
Uh-huh.
if you put family planning, which also has to do with the choices of girls and women,
Mm-hmm.
if you combine family planning with educating girls, it turns out to be number 1.
Yes.
The very first, most important thing to do to reverse global warming, educating girls and women. Paul Hawken likes to say, we thought it would be a solar panel, but it's a woman, and so that becomes the top solution. These are very interesting. I met with a man this morning who's he calls himself, he says he's an engineer, a Buddhist, and a socialist. And he sat at my dining room table this morning, and we went through each one of these, and he talked about how appropriate each one of these would be or would not be for the community of McMinnville to work on, and how he looks towards whether it's actually where we can actually do it or not. He looks at the outcomes and looks to see what would be the best ones for us to work on. That is what's next in this whole drawdown idea. Do you want me to just go ahead and talk about John Pitney and the climate and
Oh, that's
congregation? Okay.
great.
So about 6 months ago, a man named John Pitney, who's a retired Methodist minister here in town, convened a group of people from 6 churches, 6 local churches. I'm not going to name them, but 6 local churches.
Well, let's give it a try.
Let's see. So they're the cooperative ministries, the First Baptist Church, the Church on the Hill, Unitarian Universalist, St. James, I'm missing one, and the Presbyterian Church. So from those 6 churches, about 10 or so of us came together, and we started a group called Climate and Congregations. And we're all already looking to see what kinds of action steps we can take right here in town. Some of the churches are interested in solar panels, getting solar panels on all the schools here in town. There's various activities going on. We're supporting the Children's Trust, the young kids that are bringing a suit against the United States government, 21 of them plaintiffs. We went to rallies in Salem. I think we're going to be going to another one on June 4th in Portland. So we're still trying to get those voices heard in court, and it keeps being stopped and stopped. But that's we're doing lobbying at the legislature in Salem. So yesterday you may have heard the good news that the DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, voted no on Jordan Cove. That's really good news. They've been trying to get that thing approved for 6 years.
What on the screen right now, Patriciafaye, is John Pitney's, well, it just came off, John Pitney's email address.
Okay,
So
good.
if people want to,
If people want to
Get
learn more about
involved.
climate and congregations, get involved with us, that would be great if you could email John.
okay, that's a way forward. If you want to do something right now, get that email down, pitneycompost@gmail.com, and send him, say, how can I get involved?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, you're involved. You were involved Sunday. Tell us what happened last Sunday.
Well, on Sunday, we did a 2-hour presentation at the Baptist Church. 46 people came out on a really beautiful sunny afternoon to spend 2 times to hear about what Drawdown is. People were excited. They were inspired. It was really a beautiful exercise that we did. So that is available as well. If the city council wanted to do a Drawdown presentation, if any of the city agencies, I mean, we would go into schools. We will do anything. Anywhere we're invited, we'll go and present this.
So that's an open invitation
Absolutely.
to you. Now, I think your email address has been going across the screen
Okay,
as
good.
well. So they can contact you to say, yeah, we would like to have you come do
Yes.
this presentation. And I did see some responses online to your presentation, and the comments were very positive about professional and interesting, and people came away excited and educated. And so I from those comments, I would highly recommend it. And knowing you, Patriciafaye, and your passion, I would recommend that people definitely invite your presentation into their community. So let's just, I'm curious what your Buddhist engineer, socialist, is that
Yes.
friend, do you remember some of the things that he said? Oh, McMinnville, this would be some good ones for
Well,
McMinnville.
he talked about the things that McMinnville Water and Light might be involved in, as far as off-gassing the methane, as far as giving certain permits for. He talked about the water reservoir and how they could create a different kind of system that might be upgrading the way the piping comes down the hill into however that works for McMinnville Water. He said that one of the things that could stop that is because we're also happy that we have such low rates with McMinnville Water and Light. He also talked about permits that the city could give as far as requiring, when people go out to get a building permit, that the city required that solar panels be put on their houses. I mean, there are all these houses being built out beyond Hill Road right now. I don't know how many, 40, 50. There's not a solar panel out there. So if the city were to take the initiative to start requiring solar panels, how about start requiring hookups for electric vehicles, as part of the building permit? Things like that.
If not requirements, incentives sometimes could
Incentives.
be a middle ground to
Yeah.
encourage those things.
Yeah, he talked about how when you go to the gas pump and put gas into your still gas-burning car, that you see on the screen up there, there's a certain tax that goes to the feds
state
and to the state,
Right.
but there's no local tax. So talking about incentives, he said, people might yell about that a little bit, but if you had a local tax, that could be an incentive to buy an electric vehicle.
Now, the bottom one, number 20, nuclear energy.
Well, that's kind of a mixed bag, because I think somewhere in the front of the book, Paul Hawken mentions that there are several of these that could have a detrimental effect to human beings with their use.
I see.
And so nuclear energy turns out to be one of them. And there is a chapter on each one of these in the Drawdown book. So I have not read all of it, but as I read, I'm being educated myself. And with the nuclear, it's, like I say, it's a mixed bag. So there's opportunity and there's things to be cautious of.
Well, we've got one more graphic, the pie chart. Let's bring that up and maybe on the screen for the viewer.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting chart, because let me just remind you that I mentioned that education of girls and family planning, when they're lumped together into that bright pink area there, you can see that together, well, it's not quite as big as, it looks like it's not quite as big as reduced food waste and plant-rich diet if you put those two together. But it's still a really big chunk.
Yeah.
Both of them outweigh refrigeration and wind turbines. And Paul Hawken makes a point. He says, you can't just pick out a couple of them, even if they're the top-rated solutions.
Yes.
In order for us to reach drawdown by 2050, we've got to do them all. We got to do them all. And they're all beneficial to us. They're all things that we ought to be doing anyway. I mean, all of them are to help us.
You were telling me about there is a financial result.
Right. I wanted to give you that amount of money. I think it's $78 trillion. So if we do all of these, if you add up on each one of them, there's a cost and there's a savings. And if you add up all the savings over the next 30 years, it comes with the net savings is $78 trillion.
A lot of those savings would be perhaps around mitigating the damage of global warming.
It's jobs. It's
Okay.
creation of jobs. It's betterment of the whole healthcare system. I can't remember all of them, but
Well, when you talk about educating women, there you're having more productivity from people that will be contributing in better ways to the community.
Yeah.
Wind turbines, onshore. We see a lot of those up the valley, up the Columbia Gorge. It's an amazing drive. Did he talk about where these would be? I know we're doing a lot of that in the United States.
Yeah, both onshore and offshore. I think more is being done with onshore than offshore. I don't know a lot about it. A lot of people say that it kills birds and they have some kind of concern about the use of them. I don't know very much about wind turbines personally.
Okay. Well, when you made this presentation, you made a call to action to folks. And what was that? They went home, and what did they take home with
Well,
them?
they filled out a feedback form with some pretty specific questions at the end of the 2-hour presentation on Sunday. And out of 46 people, 20 people indicated that they wanted to be part of the group that goes forward. Pachamama Alliance has come up with a 5-session program that follows the introduction to Drawdown, where communities can come together, pick out 1 or 2 of these solutions, whatever seems to be appropriate for our community, and get to work on those. If you go to the Pachamama.org website, there's a part of that website that's called the Global Commons. Pachamama Alliance is in over 62 countries around the world, and there's over 3,000 trained facilitators like myself who are delivering their programs all over the world. And on that Global Commons part of the website, communities give input. They come together, they talk about, so you can read about what China's doing with regards to tree intercropping. You know, each one of these people they come and they put all their information on that part of the website. So the idea is that as our community starts to produce some results and get to work on these, that we can interface with people all over the world.
So, and tell us where we go for that again, that website.
It's Pachamama.org.
That's the one that's been going across the screen.
Good.
Okay, so people can go into more depth on all of these topics.
Absolutely.
through
I'm in
that.
the middle of an 8-week online intensive right now called the Game Changer. And it has just been, I mean, every day, I know everybody thinks you don't have enough time to do things like this, but this kind of has become what my life is about. And so right now I'm spending 2 to 3 hours a day just watching video clips, doing readings, and the videos are all inspirational. I'll tell you, there is so much good news. There is so much happening all over the world. Over 1 million organizations are working in the area of environmental sustainability, social justice, and spiritual fulfillment. We don't hear about those on the evening news. We listen to what sells is fear. You know, do you notice? You know, that's what the media is talking about. Everything that's horrifying and scary. I invite you to turn it off and listen to the good news.
And Game Changer, would that be something?
Game Changer is something that people can do online. It's free, you know, and you can sign up for that on the Pachamama website.
Okay. Well, I think people have probably got their eyebrows raised at this point about what's possible.
Good.
And that is what you're about, isn't it?
It is.
Patriciafaye?
That's what I'm about.
On what's possible.
My guest this morning told me that we need to have 3% of the population of McMinnville involved in this to have it take any traction. So right now, I would say, if you count all the people on the Zero Waste Master List, along with people that have showed an interest in this, we're probably at about 400. So
400 people.
400 people. So we have a ways to go. We need to get to at least 2,000. I think the population of McMinnville right now is a little over 33,000.
And that's your game right now.
That's my game. Let's get to 2,000. Let's march in the streets.
And you are a game changer. Thank you for being here, Patriciafaye. It's
You're
been
welcome. Thanks for
fantastic.
having me.